In this tutorial, we're going to investigate waves, but we're going to do it in a slightly different way. We're going to paint a really dark background, and then we're going to build up the surface of the water on top of that. So we're going to be painting the not waves. Hi, I'm Mark Waller. I'm all about finding beautiful things in the world, painting them, and sharing that process with you. So these are the colours I'm going to use. You can use interactive, and in fact, if you struggle with blending colours, I recommend that you use interactive. I work quite quickly, so I'm going to use the free flow, but I'm going to dish all of that paint out, and that'll get all our background sorted anyway. So ready to go. We're going to use this size canvas, this size paintbrush. That's pretty much it, and it can do attitude. All right, I'm just grabbing a big blob of phthalo blue here. Oops, that brush is a bit stiff. Some dioxazine purple. I want a nice kind of warm, dark blue like that. A little bit of water to give it some legs. And mix up a little bit more than you think. Okay, I've got my lovely dark dioxazine purple and phthalo blue mix, and I'm just going to blast it on like that. And it really doesn't matter. You don't have to be, slavish to getting these colours right. Add a bit of yellow to that, or blue, or whatever, but eventually we're going to put more colour over it, so you won't see a lot of that. I'm just going to come down to about there, because that's where my wet sand's going to be. And I like to do a nice cross hatch like that to make it look nice and even, no lines through it. And that'll get us out of trouble. So I'm washing this brush out, but if you feel that it's not clean enough, don't be scared to get another brush. That's all right. So now I'm going to get some dioxazine purple, like that. Bit of cad yellow medium, like that. A little bit more diox. And a little bit of that sky colour. So I want a kind of a greeny brown. And I think that's right, we should get back to the canvas. Okay, I did say sky colour, I actually meant watercolour. But anyway, here's my nice brown. This is the colour of dryish sand late at night. There we go, finished painting. We're done. So this is the base for our picture, and we'll be building all of the colour and all of the details on top of that. I really like painting like this. So I'm probably not going to use a lot of some of these colours, but I'm going to put them all out so that I don't have to mess around and dish them out somewhere in the process of painting. I'll stay in the flow. So we've got our background all set up, ready to go, and we're going to now paint our not waves. But what I've done is I've got a pencil, but you can use chalk, and in fact I prefer chalk, but I've put my chalk down somewhere and can't find it. And what we're going to do is we're going to set up, we're going to define where the wet sand ends, and then we're going to set up where the waves are. So we need to put them in the right proportion. And it's really just a few marks just to get things set up, and then into the painting. For this first part, we're only going to need a brush like this. I think that's about a 6 or an 8. I've used one that's fairly soft because I want it to hold quite a lot of paint. And I need to sort of blend, not blend, but make marks for a reasonable amount of time. So this is perfect for that. So this is the edge of my wet sand here. I'll just put a mark there like that. Now I'm going to make a wave about here. So I'll put the top of it there. That'll be the bottom of it. And then I'll put another one out here in the distance. Now, if you really want to, when you've got your pencil, you can just do that, and there you've got the sense of the light shining on the water already, if that helps. So I've just got neat white here, like that. And the reason I'm using white straight away is because this picture really, it's just a couple of waves on a very dark background, and I need to give it a frame to operate in. So if I go with my darkest darks and my lightest lights, I can now, this is the wave out the back, and I'm just going to do this to create the impression of the moonlight bouncing off the surface of the water out there, like that. And I want that wave to be unbroken and a few lumps here and there. Now this water in between is choppy, like that, and this wave here is about to break. So I'm going to flatten those out a little bit. And we can actually see there's a little gap there. I'm going to leave that there too because it looked nice. Painting the knot waves, and then I'm just going to do this. And that's the light shining on the back of the wave there as it's about to break. Now I'm going to clean a lot of the paint off the brush. This is my wet sand area. And I want the reflections and the wet sand like that. And I think I'm going to put a little wave, a little whitewashy wave in here in the foreground. And we might actually do an even smaller one through here like that. Like that. There's our suds behind it. And you can sort of see the painting start to take shape now. It's probably a bit too big a gap there. I'm going to just soften that up a bit. So we're sort of creating the surface, or creating the illusion of waves, by painting the bits that aren't waves. So I'm just stealing some French ultramarine blue here, a little bit of alizarin, it's probably a tiny bit too much, some white, and I think that's way too red, so I'm going to steal some phthalo blue there. That'll cool it down nicely. And I feel as though it needs a tiny bit of cadmium yellow medium to green it up a bit. And a bit more phthalo blue. And a touch more cad yellow medium. There we go. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to sort of swing a little bit like a pendulum. So we've got our darkest darks and we've got our lightest lights. And now I've done the lightest lights, so I know how light they are, and I'm going to go back into my second darkest darks almost. And I'm going to start creating the surface of the water by putting the light as it would be further away from the light source. I hope that makes sense. Now this mark out here, or this surface out here, I'm going to break up. I don't want the waves to be too uniform. And I just want to suggest the chop on the surface of the water. And it's important not to make too many patterns here, leave a few gaps. Because if you want to reflect, or if you want to flatten water, reflect the sky. And if you don't want to flatten the water, of course, leave a gap where the light's not hitting it. And so I'm leaving a few gaps here and there so it creates the impression of the surface of the water being quite broken, and doesn't hurt to come down the face of that wave a bit. And that sound is my finger dragging on the canvas so I can get the balance right. And yes, I do wear through the corner of my finger. So there's a little wave there. I'm going to keep coming in there and leave a gap. And this is quite subtle. I'd rather make it too dark than too light. This is going to be a little wave crashing in the shore break. And these lines, where the wave's about to break, become quite straight, because as the wave breaks, that line and all of these lines close behind it flatten out a little bit. But don't take my word for it, go to the beach at night. Now here, when I paint this here, I'm creating the space at the bottom of the wave. It's a bit skinny, that colour. So the strategy that I'm using with this picture is to do sort of establish my darks, then establish my lightest lights, and then my next darkest darks, and then my next lightest lights. And I want a little bit of yellow here, but I don't want that yellow to be too yellow. So I'm going to add a little bit of dioxazine purple to that, warm it up a bit, or sorry, dirty it a little bit. It's probably a better way of saying that. And none of this is set in stone. There'll be, you know, a lot of toing and throwing with this. Okay. So now I'm coming out a little bit further than I did with the white, like that. And as there's a sort of a transition from the lighter areas into the darker areas. And what I'm doing here is representing that by sort of establishing the warmer and cooler colours. And it's okay if the brush strokes are a little bit, you know, broken up here and there, because it kind of creates the impression of that choppy water. And you can sort of bring one out here and there, because it's not always going to be reflecting perfectly in one area. Now we'll come down here. And you want quite a few bits and pieces of this colour close to the light source, so it softens that transition from dark to light. Now there's a little bit, I want to do this bit, there's a little bit too much paint on my brush, so I'll wait for a little bit. Now anywhere where you don't put a line of this lighter colour will create a little wave. So I've got a little wavelet there. So as I've said, if you want to reflect, or sorry, want to flatten water, reflect the sky or the light. And if you want to not flatten it, make a wave, don't reflect the light. Now you'll notice I've used the brush up here when the paint's wetter, and as the brushes come down here, it's used up all its paint and it's a little drier. So it makes these marks down here a little more efficiently. This part, as fun as it is, I also, you know, you've got to have a little bit of glory along the way. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create the impression of this water being a little bit transparent. So I'm going to put some light shining through the back of the surface of these waves, or the back of these waves, just to create the impression of that light being behind them. And this is a super, super fun bit to do. I've changed my brush. I don't want a firm line, so I've got something that's a bit woolly and furry, because I want sort of a softer mark. So I want a kind of a turquoisey blue-green colour, but I'm going to use cad yellow medium because I want it a little bit warmer. That's phthalo blue, cad yellow medium, and I am going to add the tiniest hint of dioxazine purple. You can see how ratty this old brush is. So now I'm just going to put a bit of that green there in the face of that wave, and anywhere where the waves are a little bit steep, fading out that way. And then through there, I'm just going to soften that out like that. So I'm just going to add a little bit more cad yellow medium to that and do the same thing again. Okay, this wave's a little bit steeper, so it's thinner, which means the light shining through it's going to be a bit stronger. So I'm just going to bump that up a little bit again and soften it down, sort of gradate it down that way. That's a bigger one too, so we'll put a little bit up there. And this area is quite shallow, so I'm going to put a few of those lines through there, but they'll be much thinner because the waves are a lot smaller. Put one there like that. So I'm going back to the surface of the water now, and I've got that colour I mixed up before, but now I'm going to add a little bit of white to that and a bit more yellow. And a little bit of alizarin. And I'll get that lovely transition from warm into cool. And the great thing about this exercise is that it actually teaches us a lot about transitioning from light into shadow. And that's why this is a fun thing to paint. Okay, so I'm coming back in here to this area. I'm just going to fill in a few gaps here and there because you know that area close to the light is going to have more than just white in it. You can come out a little bit further. Like I said, there's a lot of toing and froing with this picture. We'll go backwards and forwards and establish a few areas and come back and go over them. And it's literally just that same process as before, finding where the highlights are, or imagining where the highlights are, and then establishing them by reflecting the light. You can actually use exactly the same process for the middle of the day, nighttime. Doesn't matter, it's the same process overall, just different colours. Remembering of course that none of this is set in stone, it's only paint, so if you do happen to overdo something, can easily come back and fix it later. Or paint over the whole thing and start again. So I've washed this brush out, and now I want a really dark. So I'm going to get phthalo blue and dioxazine purple. Lots of phthalo blue. Like that. And I'm actually going to add the tiniest bit of cadmium yellow medium to that, just to green it up, just the tiniest little bit. So I've got my nice dark colour there, and I just want to establish that darker area, just a hint. Go through strategically here and there. I can come through underneath there a little bit, because I want that to be quite dark and in shadow and right at the bottom of that wave. And you'll notice I'm doing this with the brush just to kind of create that little sense of little wavelets and little blobs of chop. And these areas are in quite a lot of shadow, so it's all right to go quite hard there. And what I'm going to do while I've got that colour is just suggest the lip of the wave coming down. Nice little closeout. And now come in underneath that whitewash there. Get my darks in. Bit of blood from wearing through my finger. It doesn't hurt while you've got that colour also just to throw a few little senses of there being shadows in the suds in there, because when that light's at that angle, the shadows end up being, even in the whitewash, end up being quite strong. That little wave there. I've just got that dry brush there now, and I'm just pushing that shadow back in from the side a little bit just to kind of darken up that area there. I'm going to darken that up there too. I wanted to kind of create that nice shaft of light down through the centre of the picture. So I'm going to use the free flow for this. If you can get your hands on it, do it. It's fantastic paint. I'm just going to pinch some yellow, a bit of dioxazine purple, more yellow. And we can make a decision at this point. We can either lean more towards the blues. Whoops, that was too much purple. Or we can lean more into those kind of, that warmer summer kind of night feel. I've made an executive decision. We're going to go with that. Okay, just a pile of water and we're good to go. Good thing about free flow is you can add a ton of water and there's so much pigment in it, it doesn't break it down too much. Okay, so now I just want to really establish that bit of light through the middle there. So I'll start at the top. because that initial colour I put down was quite thin. So I'm backing that white off a little bit by going over it with this lovely yellow. I'm backing off that white a little bit. I want to re-establish it. I'm just, by putting this yellow down, I'm kind of defining the edges of the area that's lit, and I want to be a little more targeted with my white. So the white that was there originally served its purpose, but now I want to be a little more intentional about where I put my marks. So I'm losing the yellow a little bit so that I can do that. Or sorry, losing the white a little bit and using the yellow to hide it. So I can do that. I hope that makes sense. And again, getting close to the back of the wave, flattening out those little brush strokes, make them a little tighter and more directional. Now this area in here, I tend to shorten and flatten the brush strokes out a lot like that because I want to create the impression of that water all being disturbed and messed up. Get rid of some of that paint. Each time remembering, of course, when you leave little gaps, you create waves. So we paint the not waves. Now, I'm just going to, because this brush has got just the right amount of paint in it, I'm just going to drag few little brush strokes down like that. I'll intensify them in the center there. And that should be starting to look like wet sand. More paint. I'm going to create the, oops, it's a bit too much. Create the chop on the top of that wave. And some suds. Now while I've got that dry brush, I'm just going to create the impression of there being a little bit of glare on the surface of the water there in that part where the light's quite intense. There's some moisture in the air there, so we want to suggest that the light's kind of bouncing off that a little bit. Like that, and we can't forget our little bits there where the wave's rolling over. So I've gone back to that colour I just mixed up, and I'm going to add a little bit of alizarin to that, and a little bit of cad yellow medium. That's probably just a little bit too much, and maybe a touch of dioxazine purple, because that's quite a lolly colour, that one. Maybe even a tiny bit of red. That's going to work. Just going to add some water to that because I want it to be pretty mobile. So what I'm doing here now is I just want to soften that transition from here to here, because I think that's a little jarring. So I'm just going to use that red or that orange combination just to soften out those edges there and define those wavelets a little more. So you can see I'm just doing it on the edges there. I'm bringing it back into the white a little bit. That's the beautiful thing about water. There's always these lovely reflections bouncing around and light going in all different directions. These are little short choppy ones to make the impression of all that disturbed water. And you can see too how that golden yellow colour, when it hits the white, it pops out a little bit. Looks a little bit stronger and more luminous. It's actually a really nice strategy to actually mix colour paler than you think, so that when you come back over with a thinner colour, that the colour stands out more. It has a little bit more brightness and luminosity. As an exercise, you could probably finish it here, in that it's helped us investigate the surface of the water, but it has also helped us investigate that idea of warm to cool, but it's also given us an idea about painting waves by not painting the waves, by painting the reflections and the light behind it. But we can actually take it a little bit further and get a little bit more mileage out of it if you want. So there's a couple of things I want to consider. I'm going to bump up this white through here to make that more intense. I'm also going to suggest that you can just see some blue-grey of the whitewash here in the shaded areas. And then the other thing I thought I might do is just mix up a lovely warm sort of purpley reddy colour and put that in the shadows in here, and that really pushes out that warm to cool kind of concept and just gives it even more life and light. They're funny little things, but they make a huge difference. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I've got that colour that I used for the waves before. I just need a very thin version of that, a little bit of phthalo blue in it, like that. And I'm going to create the impression of the wave breaking over here, and there's a thicker part of the lip. So I'm just going to do this line through there like that. And that will make more sense later. Oops. Lucky I checked. A bit runny that paint, but that's all right. That'll get me out of trouble. I'll leave that for a minute to dry. Okay, so I've just grabbed some neat white here, and I'm using the free flow because it covers so well. I'll pinch a little bit of that colour too, just for kicks, and add some light to that. Or some water to that, I should say. Okay, so now I want to create that lovely moonlit track of light on the surface of the water right through the middle of the picture. And you might notice that I've created a vanishing point with that whitewash. I've pointed the whitewash back up this way just to create a little bit of depth. Trusty wave curling over. We'll take most of that paint off the brush. Really bang up that white there, like a nice wet sand. Put some of that glare. So some of those shaded areas are quite dead, so I'm just going to steal a bit of that white there. And I reckon that colour might actually be alright, just on its own. Yep, that'll do me. So this colour is the colour we mixed up before, which was phthalo blue, alizarin with a little bit of dioxazine purple. But I've added white to that. Now, while there's obviously light bouncing around from the moon, there's also areas where there's light which isn't going to be quite so obvious, but it'll be bounced back from different parts of the sky. So I'm just going to represent that here and there. It's just another way of getting a bit more colour into a picture. And how good is this colour? And this is sort of to represent in some ways that softer light in the shadows. There's still light there, but it's much more subdued. Create the bottom of that wave there. And we might just put a few little reflections on the inside up underneath that wave. And there's only a couple more things to do now. We just want to represent that whitewash in the shaded areas. We need a nice sort of steely blue-grey to do that. And then I want to bump up, put some strength in some of the shaded areas close to the light source. So I'm going to use that same colour that I've just used, but I'm going to add some white to that. And a little bit of dioxazine purple. Like that. Oops, a bit too much. And a little bit of cad yellow medium. A touch more white. And that'll do us. So this wave now is, as it breaks, the lip starts to feather. And that feathering is quite often sort of a whitish colour. But at night, obviously, it's going to be tainted by the fact that it's in darkness. So I'm just going to do that for the moment and leave that. And then do the same thing down here. Come back in there a little bit. Same thing here. Now, I've got some other brushes that are probably better for doing this. They're cheaper and they don't hold their edges well, and they're great for getting that kind of crumbly look, but that's okay. This is working. So now my suds, paint some of that using that same colour. And over here, it's a continuation of all these suds, but they've gone into the shadows. And now I'm just going to, with the edge of the brush like that, flick some spray up, and you'll notice that it's actually quite dark in front of that highlight there, which is great because it would cast a shadow. Using your brush on its edge like that gives you a nice kind of broken, natural kind of look. Well, more natural anyway. quite offshore, that wind. So I've changed my brush and I've gone for something a little bit softer, and this is going to seem probably a little bit extreme what I'm about to do here, but looks super cool. So that's alizarin, a little bit of dioxazine purple, and a tiny bit of cad yellow medium. And I want it quite mobile. And I'm going to get in here in the whitewash. Now I don't know if you can see that, it's very subtle. Well, not subtle, but strong there. And I'm just going to, in here, and this is a really good thing, just doing this dry, a little bit of dry brushing along those edges there, really kind of warms the picture up a little bit, adds another little bit of colour to it, another dimension. In there like that, through there like that, just to warm the centre of that picture up. And you can see you can change this kind of from a very summery feel to a wintry feel by, or I should say the other way around, you can change this to a very summery feel from a wintry feel by warming it up and adding more reds and yellows. But that's getting pretty close, I reckon. A couple more spots and we're done. So I'm just getting a pile of cad yellow medium, and I'm just going to pinch a bit of it on the side of that like that. And I want it quite wet because I need the paint to be quite mobile. And I'm just going to, right on that, between that red and that yellow that I put there before, or sorry, that white and that red I put there before, just soften that up like that. Nice gold in there. Now I'm going to take most of that paint off. Do the same thing as I did before with that red. I want to put a bit of glare there. Dry brush is great for this. It's too strong. It's kind of good using it quite thin like that, because if you do go a little bit hard, you can just back it off with your hand. So that warming up again now. We can cool it down again just by putting some pure white on it if we wanted to. Want that to be quite warm through there. And here. So I'm just finishing off now with pure white, and we're done. I've used a smaller brush here too, by the way. I just want a few spots here and there like that. Right, kind of in the center of the light, like that. Helps to have a shaky hand when you're doing whitewash. These little ones. Couple of little sparkles. So this on its own is such a lovely, simple exercise, but it's great. It teaches us about the warm to cool process. It teaches us about painting the surface of the water. But it also, by me talking about painting the knot waves, it's sort of the focus becomes more on the reflection, and it helps us understand one of the elements that creates a wave, or the appearance of a wave, and that is obviously the light being reflected. So it's a really nice way to kind of reverse engineer the project. If you're interested in finding out more about waves and maybe a little bit more about the surface of the water, I'm sure there's a video here somewhere that you can go and check out.